Black boy stands all day in class. Janitor discovers a secret no one noticed. The hallway outside room 2B was quiet, too quiet for 9:14 on a Monday morning. Mr. Henry Dalton was halfway through his second mop bucket of the day when he heard the whisper, "If I sit, the bruises come back." He froze. The voice had been barely audible, like someone had slipped the words through clenched teeth. But Henry recognized it immediately. It was Malik Evans, the quiet kid in Ms. Baird's third-grade class, the one who always stood. Henry turned slowly, careful not to spook the boy. Malik was near his cubby, one arm wrapped around the strap of his oversized backpack, the other dangling stiffly by his side. His knees were bent slightly, like they were under invisible strain. He looked like he hadn't slept. "You all right, kid?" Henry asked, soft but steady. Malik didn't look up. He just nodded quickly and mumbled, "I'm fine." Henry didn't believe that for a second. Something was wrong. He'd noticed it for weeks. Malik never sat. Not at lunch, not during story time, not even at recess. He always hovered near the edge of benches or stood beside his desk, quietly shifting his weight. Most teachers chalked it up to defiance, but Henry had seen defiant kids. This wasn't that. This was fear. Henry didn't press him. He just gave a small nod, returned to mopping the floor, but his eyes never left the boy. And as Malik walked into the classroom, stiff and silent, Henry felt something cold settle into his chest. It wasn't just a quirky habit. It was a warning sign. By lunchtime, Henry had made up his mind. He started watching, not just casually. He kept a little notebook, his clipboard log, where he normally wrote down light bulb replacements and maintenance requests. That day, he added something new. Malik Evans. Refuses to sit. Whispers about bruises, trembling in legs. Red flag. What he didn't know was how deep this would go, and how fast it would unravel. Malik Evans was one of those kids who moved through the world like he expected it to hit back. He was small for his age, with soft eyes and a nervous energy that made him look like he was always bracing for impact. His clothes never fit quite right. Too big, too loose, like he was hiding inside them, and his voice, when he did speak, was barely more than a whisper. Teachers had started writing him off early in the year. "He's oppositional," Ms. Baird had told the school counselor, "won't participate, doesn't follow basic instructions. Just stands there like a statue." The counselor made a note. The nurse had seen him once after he vomited in class. She noticed faint bruising along his lower back when she helped him change into a clean shirt. She flagged it. But when the social worker called his foster parent, Eddie Kramer, the man was polite, calm, and quick to offer explanations. "Roughhousing," he said. "Malik's a clumsy kid, plays too hard." Case closed, but Henry didn't buy it. He had been a janitor at Washington Elementary for 16 years, long enough to know when something was off. And Malik wasn't just off. He was showing signs. By Wednesday, Henry had started tracking everything. Malik's arrival times, his posture, the way he winced if someone brushed too close to his side. Once, Henry watched him flinch when a chair scraped too loudly across the floor. Then came the bathroom incident. It was just after 10 a.m. The hall was quiet. Henry was cleaning the third-floor boys' restroom when he heard it. A thud, followed by a muffled sob. Henry dropped the mop. He pushed the stall door open and found Malik curled in the corner, his knees drawn up, his arms hugging his ribs. His face was pale, sweat clung to his forehead, and on the back of his shirt, just above the waistband, was a red smear. Blood. Henry crouched beside him, hands trembling. "What happened, Malik?" The boy shook his head, silent. Henry didn't push. He didn't touch him. He just waited. Eventually, Malik whispered, "If I sit for too long. He says I'm lazy. I have to sit on the stool. If I move, He hits. Henry blinked, heart racing. What stool? He asked gently. Malik didn't answer, but his eyes filled with tears. That night, Henry wrote more in his notebook. He sketched out what Malik said, circled it in red. Then he called a friend, Angela Ramirez, a part-time school nurse and one of the few people who actually listened. "I don't have hard proof," Henry said, "but this kid's in trouble, real trouble." Angela sighed. "You want me to flag it again? You know how slow the system moves?" "I know," Henry said. "That's why I'm not going through the system this time." Angela paused. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to catch him," Henry said quietly. "On camera." Henry spent the next day preparing. He had an old motion-triggered camera at home, one he'd used years ago to catch raccoons digging through his trash. He dusted it off, charged it, and brought it to school in his tool bag. There was a supply closet at the end of the hall near the drop-off zone. It had a narrow slit of a window that overlooked the curb where parents and guardians pulled up. Henry wedged the camera onto the shelf behind the Windex bottles and adjusted it just enough to get a clear view of the lane without drawing attention. He didn't tell the administration. He didn't tell the teachers. He didn't even tell Angela. If he was wrong, it would blow over. If he was right, well, then maybe Malik would finally be safe. For 4 days, Henry checked the footage every night. Nothing unusual. Malik got out of the same navy blue SUV each morning. The man driving never got out. Just leaned across the seat, said something Henry couldn't hear, and waited until Malik walked up the sidewalk. Then, on the 5th day, Henry saw it. It was early, 7:12 a.m. The light was soft, shadows still long on the sidewalk. Malik opened the passenger door slowly, one leg swinging out, then hesitating. The man, Eddie Kramer, reached across the seat and yanked the backpack from Malik's shoulders, so hard the boy's neck snapped backward. Then came the hit, sharp, fast, open palm to the back of Malik's head. Malik stumbled, bracing against the car door. The video didn't have sound, but the posture said enough. Fear, total submission. Then Eddie shoved the bag back at him and drove off, wheels jerking against the curb. Henry sat back in his chair, breath shallow. His fingers were clenched so tightly around the USB drive he'd just loaded that his knuckles turned white. He had it. He finally had it. But he also had a choice. Turning it over to the school might get buried. He knew how easily lost footage or misfiled complaints could happen. Bureaucracy could protect predators just as easily as it protected paperwork. He needed someone who would move fast, someone who wouldn't wait. That night, he drove to his sister's house in Chesterfield. Diana Dalton wasn't just family. She was a youth court advocate with a no-nonsense reputation and a Rolodex of contacts in child welfare. He handed her the USB and told her everything. By the time he left, she was already on the phone. "I'll get this in the right hands," she promised. "I won't let it get buried." Henry nodded. He trusted her. Still, he didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, Diana called with news. "They're moving on it," she said. "The footage lit a fire. A caseworker and a detective are visiting the home this afternoon. If the boy confirms it, they'll remove him immediately." Henry's stomach twisted. What if the kid's too scared to talk? "They saw the video, Henry," she said. "They can't ignore it. It's not just some bruises now, it's violence. On record. On tape." He sat down, letting the relief sink in. Hours later, he got the update. Malik had been removed from the house, temporarily placed at a crisis shelter for the night, pending an emergency foster placement. But that's when another problem emerged. The file on Malik, crafted from months of teacher complaints and misread behavioral flags, labeled him defiant, manipulative, high needs. A red flag for potential foster families. Henry could feel the fury bubbling inside him. The system had failed this boy once, and now, even after being rescued, it was threatening to fail him again. That night, Henry did something he never imagined. He pulled out the emergency fostering packet from the county website, filled in every line, called Diana, and said the words that surprised even himself. "If there's no one else, I'll take him." The knock came just past 9 p.m. Henry had barely finished washing the dinner dishes, the emergency fostering application still half filled on the kitchen table. He wiped his hands on a towel, heart suddenly hammering in his chest, and opened the door. There stood Diana, tired eyes, wind-blown curls, and standing beside her, a small figure with a too large backpack and a look that could crack concrete. Malik. No words came at first. The boy didn't lift his eyes. He just stood there like someone waiting to be turned away again. Diana gave a small nod, almost apologetic. "They cleared your place for emergency placement. The shelter was full, and—" She paused, lowering her voice. "He asked for you." Henry looked down at the boy and saw a flicker of recognition behind the guarded expression. "Hey," Henry said softly. Malik gave the smallest nod, eyes still locked on his own shoes. "It's warm inside," Henry offered. "You want to come in?" Another pause. Then Malik stepped over the threshold. Diana followed, gently placing a folder on the counter. "Paperwork's not all done. Technically, this is still temporary placement, but they're expediting everything. You're cleared for the next 72 hours until the formal home check." Henry nodded, but his focus never left Malik. The boy hadn't sat down. His backpack was still clutched like a shield. Henry walked to the couch and patted the cushion. "You don't have to talk," he said. "But this is your space now. You can sit, lie down, stretch, whatever you want. No one's gonna punish you for it." That was when Malik finally looked up. Not long, just long enough for Henry to see it. That same haunted expression. That deep-seated fear mixed with disbelief. Like someone who wanted to trust, but had learned the cost. Malik stepped forward and very slowly, like someone touching something hot, lowered himself onto the couch, his knees bent, his body rigid at first, like he expected a blow at any second. But when none came, when all he got was silence and the low hum of the refrigerator, he exhaled, a long, shaky breath. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. The next morning, Henry walked Malik into school, not as a janitor making rounds, but as a caretaker guiding his foster child. That walk through the front doors felt different. Eyes followed them. Teachers glanced up, conversations paused. There were no gasps, no loud questions, but the message was clear. People had noticed. Ms. Reeves, the front office receptionist, tilted her head. "Mr. Henry?" He nodded once, his voice steady. "He's with me now." No one argued. That afternoon, Henry adjusted his shift, coming in early before sunrise to mop and clean, then finishing by lunchtime so he could be present for Malik after school. The principal allowed it with a quiet, "do what you need to do," and a pat on the back. The staff didn't ask for details, but the shift in perception was palpable. Where Malik had once been labeled a problem, a disruption, now they watched him more closely, but with something that looked closer to concern. But not everyone changed. Ms. Cranston, the guidance counselor, approached Henry in the hallway 2 days later. She was polite, smiling, but her voice had a patronizing edge. "Mr. Wallace, I heard you've taken in Malik. That's commendable. But I do hope you're prepared. His file's long, aggressive tendencies, defiance. He's been through 3 homes, and I know you're, well, not trained in this." Henry met her eyes without blinking. Maybe the problem wasn't him. Her smile froze. Then she nodded once, adjusted her lanyard, and walked away. The days that followed were a crash course in trauma care. Malik didn't like closed doors. He flinched when someone raised their voice, even from across the room. He never reached for seconds at dinner unless Henry offered first, and he still preferred to stand, even when sitting was safe. But small changes began to show. One night Henry found him on the floor, sketching something with broken crayons, a crude drawing of a wooden stool. Beside it, in stick figures, a boy with angry red lines across his back. Henry crouched beside him. "Is that the stool?" he asked quietly. Malik didn't answer. He just kept coloring. Henry nodded. "You don't ever have to see that stool again. Not in this house. Not ever." Later, Malik folded the drawing and tucked it inside his backpack. That weekend, they visited a flea market. Henry let Malik pick out a beanbag chair. It was bright orange. Too loud, too big for the corner of the room, but Malik sat in it without hesitation. That night he curled up in it to read, and for the first time Henry saw the boy fall asleep in a chair. But peace was short-lived. Diana called Monday night. "You need to be ready," she said. "Kramer's appealing the emergency removal. He's calling in a lawyer, and the county's overworked, which means any procedural hiccup could send this spinning." Henry's voice dropped. "Even after the video? They're trying to frame it as a misinterpretation. Say it was disciplinary, that Malik's unstable, and well, you're a janitor, not a trained foster. That's what they're gonna use." Henry's grip tightened around the phone. "They want to send him back?" "They're trying." Silence settled over the line. But Henry wasn't shaken. He had something they didn't. "I have records, logs, photos, that bathroom incident, and Malik's drawing. I'm not letting that kid go back to hell." Diana's voice softened. "Then prepare to fight." Henry did. He printed every note, every date, every odd moment. He organized them into folders. He reached out to the nurse, Miss Angie, and she agreed to testify. He asked a teacher, Miss Collin, who had seen Malik freeze at story time, to write a letter. The janitor was about to go to war, not with tools, but with truth. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Henry spent the 2 nights leading up to it, preparing like a man heading into trial, because in a way, he was. It wasn't just Malik's safety hanging in the balance, it was his credibility, his word against that of a man with spotless paperwork and just enough charm to pass as tough but fair. The courthouse was a beige rectangle tucked between rows of strip malls and fast food joints, but inside it felt colder than stone. Malik sat beside him in the waiting area, knees bouncing under his jeans, fingers gripping the edge of the plastic chair. His new backpack, the one Henry bought from the clearance aisle at Target, rested at his feet, still zipped shut, untouched since they left the house. "You nervous?" Henry asked. Malik gave a small shrug. "You want to go over what might happen?" "I know," the boy whispered. "You already told me." Henry nodded. He didn't press. Instead, he pulled out the folder again, the one with labeled tabs and color-coded sections. He had testimonies, printouts of incident logs, the video file backed up 3 different ways, and Malik's drawing of the stool. Kramer walked in 5 minutes later. Tall, pressed gray suit, not a single hair out of place. He moved like someone who had never been told no. His lawyer trailed behind him, a woman with a sharp chin and even sharper stilettos. When Kramer caught sight of Henry and Malik, his lips curved, not quite a smile, but something colder. A smirk. Malik froze. Henry leaned down, voice low. "You're safe. He doesn't get to touch you. Not now. Not ever again." Malik didn't speak, but he nodded. The courtroom wasn't large, just 4 rows of benches, a judge's bench that had seen too many tired eyes and too little justice, and a bailiff who looked like he'd rather be somewhere else. Judge Brennan, a man in his 60s with thinning hair and a quiet but stern presence, entered at exactly 9:02. He scanned the documents in front of him as if they were already weighing down his morning. Then the hearing began. Kramer's attorney went first. She laid out a timeline. Mr. Kramer has fostered 5 children over the last 7 years, none of whom have sustained injuries under his care. There have been behavioral issues, yes, but those were documented by social workers, not dismissed. Malik, unfortunately, has a long history of outbursts, lies, and fabricated claims of mistreatment. Henry's fingers curled around the edge of his chair. The attorney gestured to the table. And while Mr. Wallace, she gave a tight smile, has acted with admirable passion, he is not trained in trauma care, and his position within the school system might make his perspective subjective. Brennan raised an eyebrow. Subjective? He is not a mandated reporter. He is a janitor who developed a bond with a student. Emotion is not evidence. Henry stood. May I respond, Your Honor? Brennan nodded. Go ahead. Henry didn't pace. He didn't raise his voice. He just opened the folder and pulled out the printed screenshots of the video, passing them to the clerk. The bailiff handed them to the judge. These stills show Mr. Kramer pulling Malik's backpack, striking him, and then shoving him toward the school building. This footage was captured from a mounted camera in a school storage closet. It's time-stamped. The full video was submitted yesterday. He paused. And I'd like the court to know that I've kept a private observation log for over a decade. I've documented patterns, behavior, injuries that didn't line up with explanations. This wasn't a one-time thing. Malik isn't lying. The room was silent. Brennan flipped through the pages, expression unreadable. Kramer leaned toward his attorney, whispering something. That's when Malik stood up. No one asked him to. He stepped forward, small shoulders squared, voice shaking but steady. I didn't make it up, he said, staring straight at the judge. I didn't lie. He said sitting meant I was lazy. He made me stand for hours, sometimes on that stool. He called it the lazy stool. He said if I moved, I'd get the belt. Henry froze. This wasn't rehearsed. Malik had never said those words before, not even to him. Judge Brennan looked up, eyes sharper now. Malik, he said gently, do you feel safe with Mr. Wallace? Malik turned to look at Henry, then back to the judge. He never yelled at me. He let me sit, and he bought me orange juice even when I didn't ask for it. Kramer scoffed. Brennan held up a hand. Mr. Kramer, one more outburst and you'll be removed. There was a moment, a pause so deep it felt like the entire room was waiting to exhale. Then Brennan spoke. I've reviewed the video, the testimonies, the medical notes from the nurse, the observations from the school staff. I find the evidence compelling and credible. He looked at Kramer. Your appeal is denied. Kramer's face dropped. No more smirk. No more confidence. And this court is ordering a full investigation into the past foster placements associated with Mr. Kramer. Effective immediately, he is to be removed from the county-approved foster list. Gasps echoed in the room. The lawyer stiffened. Malik looked at Henry again. This time he smiled. It was small, trembling, but it was real. When the hearing ended, Henry walked Malik out of the building. Cameras were starting to gather. Somehow the story had gotten out. A few reporters tried to approach. Henry held up a hand. No interviews. One of them, a local journalist named Dana Green, stepped closer. Do you think you made a difference, Mr. Wallace? He paused, then said simply, I think Malik did. And together they walked to the car. No longer just janitor and student, but protector and survivor. It wasn't even 3 days after the courtroom decision that the fallout started spreading like wildfire. Henry had just finished mopping up a spilled juice box near the cafeteria when his phone buzzed. It was Diana, his sister, the child advocate who'd helped him push Malik's case through the system. Her voice was clipped and urgent. "Kramer's past placements. There's more," she said. 3 kids, different years, same patterns, emotional abuse, forced standing, injuries no one believed. Henry leaned against the wall, mop still dripping onto the floor. "And no one flagged this before?" "They did. But guess what?" Diana exhaled. One of the intake supervisors at Child Services was Kramer's cousin. It was all buried. Sanitized reports, misfiled documents, even kids labeled as liars. Henry felt his stomach turn. So this wasn't just neglect. It was protected neglect. Exactly. But that's about to change. She explained that a new internal task force had been formed to investigate all cases tied to that branch of the department. Names were already surfacing. There would be hearings, possible criminal charges. By the time Henry hung up, he was trembling, not out of fear, but rage and relief. What if that camera hadn't been set up? What if Malik had been brushed off again? Later that day, Henry returned home to find Malik at the small folding table in their living room, sketching something with colored pencils. The boy looked up, a faint smile on his lips. "Want to see?" he asked. Henry sat beside him. It was a drawing of 2 chairs. One was jagged and dark, labeled Before. The other was soft, round, and colored in bright shades of blue and green. Now. Malik had written something underneath. "One of them hurt me. One of them lets me rest." Henry blinked away, a sting in his eyes. "That's beautiful, Malik. You think I can hang it up?" "Only if you want to." "I do. I really do." That weekend, the local paper ran a front-page story. Custody system under scrutiny after foster abuse case sparks citywide review. The photo beneath the headline showed Henry standing outside the courthouse, one protective hand on Malik's shoulder. They hadn't posed. It was just a moment the photographer had caught, a man who looked like he was doing everything in his power to guard something fragile. The attention was uncomfortable. Reporters called. Advocacy groups emailed. One even offered to feature their story in a documentary. Henry turned most of them down. He didn't want Malik to be paraded around as a symbol, but he did agree to speak at a school board meeting. The room was packed. Principals, counselors, teachers, parents who had never met him but now recognized him. He wore his work boots and his janitor's uniform, refusing to dress up just because they were listening now. He stood at the podium and told them everything, about the bruises, about the stool, about the silence, and about the system that ignored the truth until it came from a janitor's mouth. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a teacher. I don't have letters after my name," he said. "But I've walked these halls for 14 years. I see what's missed, and I knew that boy was in trouble long before anyone did." Someone in the crowd clapped. Then another. It spread slowly, not a standing ovation, just a quiet acknowledgement that the man they'd once passed in the hallways without a second glance had done something extraordinary. Back at school, Malik's world was changing in small but vital ways. He had a new desk. He sat during lessons now, still fidgety, still cautious, but seated. Ms. Dobbs, his teacher, started inviting him to lead warm-up questions. The kids no longer called him weird for always standing. They started seeing him for what he was, brave. One afternoon during art time, Malik raised his hand and asked if he could draw a stool again. "Of course," Ms. Dobbs said. This time it was a rocket. In place of the words lazy stool, he wrote, "Launch pad." Ms. Dobbs was stunned. She asked what he meant. "Mr. Wallace says I can be anything now," Malik said softly, "even someone who sits." It hit her like a punch to the chest. That Friday, Henry came to pick Malik up after school. The boy came bounding out of the classroom, his backpack bouncing behind him, the rocket drawing in his hands. "I got picked for Student of the Week," he said breathlessly. "Can we hang this on the fridge?" Henry grinned. "We'll put it right in the middle." As they walked toward the exit, a few teachers paused to wave. Some gave nods. One whispered, "Thank you." But Henry didn't say anything back. He just smiled, his hand resting lightly on Malik's shoulder. The battle wasn't over, but the war for one child's peace. That part had already been won. 3 weeks after the school board meeting, Henry Wallace stood at his kitchen counter making grilled cheese sandwiches, while Malik hunched over a stack of worksheets at the fold-out table. A light jazz tune hummed from the old radio near the window, the kind of background noise that kept the apartment feeling warm. Malik was humming too, low and distracted, tapping his pencil rhythmically against the table. Henry paused, watching him for a moment. There was a lightness in Malik's posture now. Not full-on confidence, not yet. But his shoulders no longer curled inward like they had when he first moved in. The boy was beginning to breathe freely. Then came the knock on the door. Henry wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened it cautiously. Outside stood a man in a gray suit, with a sharp smile and a badge hanging from a lanyard that read, "Child Protective Services, Internal Compliance." Behind him stood another man, bigger, with a square jaw and sunglasses too dark for the overcast afternoon. Henry's chest tightened. "Can I help you?" The first man offered a polite nod. "Mr. Wallace, we're conducting a routine follow-up for cases that have recently been publicized. You've been fostering Malik Robinson for several weeks now." Henry hesitated. "That's right." "We'd like to come in, ask a few questions, check on his environment. Just protocol." Henry glanced at Malik, who had stopped writing and now looked up, frozen. Henry stepped outside and gently pulled the door behind him, blocking the view. "I wasn't told anyone was coming. Shouldn't this be scheduled through the caseworker?" The man's smile thinned. "We have clearance from the regional office. The case has escalated due to internal reviews. Some concerns were raised about media exposure and the possible mishandling of confidential information." Henry stared at him. Something didn't sit right. Who flagged those concerns? The man's gaze didn't waver. "As I said, internal. Now, are you going to let us in, or should we notify the court that you're uncooperative?" Henry's jaw clenched. "Let me call Diana, Malik's legal advocate. If this is official, she should be present." That wiped the smirk off the agent's face. There was a flicker. Brief, but telling. "No need for that," he said, more curt now. "We'll return with her present if that makes you more comfortable." Henry didn't respond. He just stepped back inside and shut the door firmly. "Who were they?" Malik asked softly. Henry crouched down beside him. "Probably just people trying to make a lot of noise before things really change. You don't need to worry." But Henry was worried. He called Diana immediately, explained every detail. There was a long pause on the line before she answered. "They're stalling. Someone on the inside doesn't want us digging any deeper. I'm not surprised. You stirred up a hornet's nest." Henry exhaled sharply. "So what now?" Diana's voice grew steely. "Now we document everything, every knock, every call, every so-called check-in. I'm forwarding this to the state ombudsman's office, and I'll have a legal observer with you tomorrow." That night, Henry barely slept, not because he feared for himself, but because he knew the system wasn't just cracked. It was fighting back. The next morning, a different kind of knock came, a slower, softer one. It was Miss Dobbs, Malik's teacher, holding a folder. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this," she said hesitantly, "but I thought you should see it." Inside the folder were printouts of Malik's classroom behavior reports from the past year. Scribbled across many of them were comments like, "refuses to comply, disruptive in group work, and most damningly, possibly manipulative." But stapled at the back was something new, a fresh observation form from the last 2 weeks. It read, Malik participated in reading group. Volunteered an answer, showed empathy toward peer struggling with spelling. Henry looked up, heart clenching. He's doing better, Ms. Dobbs said softly, and it made me look back at how many times I just wrote him off. I'm ashamed of some of what I wrote here. Henry nodded. You're not the only one who missed what was in front of them. But you didn't. Later that day, the school principal, Mrs. Harmon, called Henry into her office. He assumed it would be about another administrative wrinkle or maybe pushback over the media attention. But instead, she handed him a printed email. It was from a local community foundation. They'd read about Henry and Malik's story and were offering to fund a pilot mentorship program at the school for students facing hardship, a program Henry would help design. He stared at the letter, speechless. I don't know what to say, he muttered. Mrs. Harmon smiled. Say yes. Say you'll be the guy who keeps noticing the kids. No one else does. He chuckled under his breath. That part I can do. Back at home that night, Henry told Malik the news. They want me to help more kids like you, he said, stirring a pot of macaroni and cheese. Malik blinked. Kids like me? Yeah, brave, watchful, smarter than the grown-ups realize. The boy grinned. As they ate, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, that the people trying to silence the truth hadn't given up. But for now they had light, and for now they had each other. And that, Henry thought, would be enough to keep going. The first sign of retaliation came not through words, but silence. On Monday morning, the supply order that Henry had placed 2 weeks ago mysteriously vanished from the district database. The custodial closet was still half empty, and no one seemed to know where the missing cleaning supplies had gone. When he asked the office manager, she gave a tight-lipped shrug. It's probably a glitch in the system, she said, eyes flicking away. That afternoon, Henry found his access key card deactivated. He had to wait 20 minutes before the security guard let him back in. Weird, the guard said. Didn't think they'd flag you. Henry didn't say anything, but deep down, he knew exactly what was happening. Someone was trying to make him feel small again, quiet, replaceable. But they'd underestimated how deep his resolve ran now. That evening, as he and Malik sat in their usual corner of the living room, Malik on the beanbag, Henry on the floor, a chessboard between them, Henry asked softly, You ever feel like someone wants you to stop doing the right thing? Malik looked up, blinking behind his oversized glasses. All the time, he said. That's how I knew it was the right thing. Henry smiled and nodded, placing a rook back on the board. Smart kid. That night, Diana called with an update, and it wasn't good. The county office is being unusually slow, she said. Your mentorship program paperwork is stalled. And Malik's case file, there's now an internal note questioning the objectivity of the video evidence. Henry felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. You've got to be kidding me. I wish I was. Someone's trying to paint this as a vendetta, that you're emotionally involved and not credible. Henry pressed the phone tighter to his ear. So what now? Diana was quiet for a beat. Now we play smart. We go higher. The next day, Diana set up a call with someone from the State Inspector General's office, a woman named Tessa Linwood, who had a reputation for handling politically sensitive investigations. She was measured, skeptical, but listened intently as Henry laid out everything from the ignored complaints to the erased supply order and the now flagged video. Why do you think you're being targeted? She asked. Because I noticed a kid when no one else did, Henry said, and because the man who hurt him has friends in places that can keep things quiet. Linwood didn't flinch. If that's true, I'll need more than a story. I'll need every scrap of paper, every report, every glitch. Henry was ready. He scanned and sent all of it, every log from his janitorial notebook, every email, every delivery receipt that never arrived, even the time-stamped footage again. 3 days later, Ms. Linwood sent an email with one line: "We're opening a formal inquiry." That should have been a relief. But what followed was chaos. The next morning, the school's fire alarm went off twice. False alarms. Parents flooded the front office. Local news picked up the story and began asking questions. Teachers whispered about a possible safety audit. Then came the anonymous call to CPS, suggesting Malik was possibly being coached to exaggerate trauma for media attention. Henry almost snapped, but Malik just looked at him that night and said, "They're scared." Henry blinked. "What?" "They're scared. That means we're close, right?" And for the first time in days, Henry truly smiled. The following week, things came to a head. Tessa Linwood arrived at the school unannounced with 2 agents in tow. They carried clipboards, took photographs, asked for access to records. She didn't speak much to Henry at first, but when she passed him in the hallway, she gave the smallest of nods. "You were right," she said quietly. At the same time, a regional official sent a directive ordering Curtis Bell, Malik's former guardian, to appear for a deposition regarding his fostering record. The hearing would now include a review of every placement he'd overseen in the past 5 years. Henry attended the preliminary deposition. He sat quietly in the back while Curtis tried to maintain his facade. "He was a troubled kid," Curtis said. "I tried discipline, structure, and the bruises," the investigator asked. Curtis shifted. "He fell. He was clumsy. He lied often, manipulative." Then came the footage, displayed on a large monitor. Curtis flinched. The room went still. "You call that discipline?" the investigator asked. Curtis didn't answer. Malik wasn't in the room. He didn't need to be. Henry had insisted that he didn't need to relive it again. Back at the apartment that night, Henry broke the news gently. They saw it. The video. The judge did too. Malik didn't say anything for a moment. Then he whispered, "So he won't come back?" He won't come back. And Henry meant it. He knew it wasn't over. The system was still tangled, still slow, still filled with people willing to turn their heads the other way. But the storm that once hovered over Malik had begun to clear. As Henry tucked him in that night, Malik rolled onto his side and said, "Hey, Mr. Wallace." "Yeah? Thank you for sitting with me when I didn't even know how to sit still." Henry's throat tightened. "Always, buddy." He shut the light off, and for the first time he saw Malik truly rest, not just sleep, but rest. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more meetings, maybe more resistance. But tonight they had peace, and it was earned. The day of the hearing arrived cloaked in gray skies and a steady drizzle that clung to the air like nerves on a collar. Henry stood in the back hallway of the county juvenile courthouse, straightening the sleeves of his jacket for the 5th time. He'd opted for the same work boots he wore every day at school, polished until they caught light. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he needed to feel grounded. Today he wasn't just a janitor. He was a witness, a protector, a stand-in father. And for the first time in his life, his voice would be on the record. Malik had chosen to stay home with Diana. It had been his decision, and Henry supported it. The boy didn't need to see the man who had broken him try to twist truth into fiction. The courtroom was small but tense. Curtis Bell sat at the defense table with an expensive-looking attorney in a navy blue suit, his posture stiff but face unreadable. He looked like a man who'd built his whole life on being just on the right side of the law, and now couldn't figure out why it wasn't enough. The prosecutor opened with the video. Again, the slap, the stumble, the weight of Curtis's hand forcing a child into submission under the pretense of discipline. Curtis's lawyer objected, claimed the angle was unclear, that it could have been a gesture taken out of context, but the judge overruled him. Then Henry was called. He took the stand and, under oath, described every moment, each time he had seen Malik standing during story time, trembling at his cubby, hiding in the bathroom stall. He explained the bloodstains, the hushed whispers, the image of a child too afraid to sit down because his skin remembered what sitting meant. "And when did you suspect something was wrong?" the prosecutor asked. Henry looked directly at Curtis. "The moment he told me that sitting brought back the bruises." The room fell into a hush. Curtis shifted in his seat. His attorney scribbled something frantically on a notepad. Henry went on. He recounted the system's failures, the first dismissed nurse report, the supply room surveillance camera he'd installed out of desperation, and the roundabout path it took to get anyone to listen. "Why did you do it?" the judge asked quietly when Henry stepped down. He paused. "Because I couldn't unsee what I saw, and because when a child's too afraid to speak, someone has to speak for him." The judge nodded once, firm, measured, then called a recess. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered like moths around glass. One tried to thrust a microphone in Henry's face. He waved them off. But later that night he saw the clip anyway, his words replayed on the local news, muted behind captions. When a child's too afraid to speak, someone has to speak for him. By the next morning the clip had gone viral. Dozens of local teachers shared it. A few child advocates posted statements thanking the janitor with more courage than an entire school board. Henry was stunned. He'd never asked for attention. But then, something changed. The superintendent's office called. They wanted to meet. Henry hesitated, thinking it might be a warning, but when he arrived it was the opposite. "We'd like to invite you," the district official said, "to help lead a task force on child welfare awareness in our schools." Henry blinked. "Me? Yes? You've shown insight we've ignored for too long." It was surreal. That same week, Diana received a call from a state senator's office. They were reviewing broader oversight reform of the foster care pipeline. They wanted to consult the people who made this case break through. Malik's file was updated, officially clearing all behavior flags. His new status, trauma-informed case. No disciplinary action pending. But even with all the attention, Henry never let it go to his head. Back home, Malik was still cautious, still unsure what came next. Henry made a point to keep everything steady. Routine. Until one day Malik handed him a letter. "I wrote it for court, but I didn't give it to them," the boy said, voice soft. Henry unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were deliberate. "When I had to stand all day, it hurt. But I thought if I moved, it would hurt worse. Mr. Wallace made me feel safe sitting again. If you ask me who he is, I'd say he's someone who saw what no one else did and didn't look away." Henry didn't speak. He just reached out, gently pulled the boy into a hug, and let the silence carry everything words couldn't. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were parting. And somewhere in that quiet moment, Henry knew they'd finally made it through the darkest part. But the light wasn't just for them. It was for every kid still waiting to be seen. The final ruling came on a Tuesday morning that felt too bright for what it signified. Henry sat stiffly on a wooden bench outside the courthouse, a paper coffee cup cooling in his hands, barely touched. Malik was with Diana in the family waiting room upstairs, shielded from the frenzy of attorneys, court officers, and the dozen news cameras already set up outside. Henry hadn't meant for this to become public. He never imagined a janitor's testimony would ripple through the system like this. But once the footage aired, once Malik's drawing of the safe stool had made rounds online, people started paying attention, not just to Malik, but to every kid whose quiet suffering had gone unnoticed. Inside the courtroom, the judge's voice rang firm as she addressed Curtis Bell. In light of overwhelming evidence, including first-hand testimony, corroborated surveillance footage, and statements from former foster placements previously disregarded, this court finds you, Mr. Bell, in violation of foster care regulations, guilty of child endangerment and obstruction of prior investigations. Curtis didn't flinch, but Henry noticed how tightly his hands gripped the defense table, how the blood drained from his face when the judge continued. You are hereby stripped of all foster licensing, prohibited from working in child-related fields indefinitely, and referred for criminal prosecution. Furthermore, the court finds credible evidence of interference within the county's intake office. A secondary investigation will proceed. Outside, news broke before the court had even recessed. The local office's involvement in burying multiple complaints against Curtis became a regional scandal. The intake officer, revealed to be Curtis's brother-in-law, was suspended pending formal review. Advocacy groups seized the moment to demand statewide foster oversight reform. Back in Henry's small apartment, Malik didn't celebrate. He didn't cheer. He simply sat on the couch, his couch now, curled up under a blanket with a peanut butter sandwich and a Marvel cartoon playing low on the TV. Henry sat nearby, reading the paper, waiting. Eventually, Malik spoke. So, I'm not going back? Henry looked at him carefully. You're not going anywhere you don't want to. That's over. Malik nodded, but then glanced down at his legs, shifting as though checking to make sure no invisible bruises were returning. I still don't like sitting too long, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Henry smiled gently. You don't have to, but if you ever want to, there's a soft cushion right there and it's yours. Malik didn't reply. He just leaned a little closer. A few weeks later, the school board held a surprise assembly. Teachers, students, local families, and officials gathered in the gymnasium, unsure why they'd been called. Henry stood in the back, mop handle in hand, until the superintendent called him to the stage. Reluctantly, he approached, unsure what was happening. We often talk about heroes in the classroom, the superintendent began, but sometimes they work quietly in the halls, in the shadows, carrying buckets and pushing brooms. Today, we honor Mr. Henry Wallace for doing what no one else did. He paid attention. And he acted. There was no roaring applause, just a long standing ovation, teachers with tears in their eyes, students clapping without quite knowing why. And Malik, standing beside Diana in the front row, holding a framed drawing, the safe stool, the one he'd drawn not just as art, but as a promise. The crowd hushed as Malik stepped forward and handed the drawing to Henry. You saw me, the boy said simply, voice clearer than anyone had ever heard from him in public. Henry swallowed hard and nodded. I saw you, he said back, and I'll keep seeing you. Every day. That evening, a mural appeared on the school's hallway wall, small, just a painted stool, beneath a window with sunlight pouring in. Beneath it, in simple black script, justice starts when someone notices. Malik began therapy with a counselor who specialized in trauma. Diana helped file paperwork for Henry to become a long-term guardian. The school established a new policy. All child behavior flags had to be reviewed by at least 2 independent staff members, one of whom couldn't be an educator. They called it the Malik Rule. By spring, Malik was sitting more comfortably in class, answering questions with quiet confidence, and even joining the art club. The other kids stopped whispering. He was just another student now, and that was the greatest gift. As for Henry, he never asked for recognition. He still scrubbed gum off cafeteria tables and replaced ceiling tiles when it rained. But he also joined the district's Child Welfare Task Force, trained new staff in abuse recognition, and met with parents during town halls. And every once in a while, when a student lingered at their locker, or sat quietly too long, or looked away a bit too fast, Henry would pause. Not to question, but to notice. because he knew. Change doesn't always come with sirens or fanfare. Sometimes it comes with a mop bucket and a heart that refuses to look the other way. If this story touched you and you believe that the smallest act of kindness can spark the biggest change, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Because the next story that needs to be told might be the one that saves a life. And sometimes it only takes one person to see it.